From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. I'm Tyne Morgan, and here's what's in store over the next 60 minutes. Corn growers were dealt a blow on E15 just last week.
It was a kick in the gut.
But less than a week later, President Trump's trip to Iowa signaled hope.
They're very close to getting it done, so I just wanted to let you know that.
But is this the catalyst corn prices have been waiting for, or is it another false start?
Well, I don't think it's a silver bullet. It certainly is going to help.
And the major winter storm that walloped the U.S. turned the South into what looks like a war zone still today. The damage done and how Florida citrus growers are bracing for this weekend's Arctic blast. Now for the news, parts of the South are still recovering from a monstrous winter storm that brought snow, ice, and bitter cold temperatures to a large portion of the country last weekend. Farmers and ranchers working overtime this week to protect livestock from the winter blast that hit 28 states. We had reports it slowed grain transport and ethanol production to conserve natural gas. And there's also concerns that the winter wheat not covered by snow may be damaged.
I think the only saving grace is there's now a little skiff of snow, and in eastern Kansas even more than that, sitting on top of the ground and on top of the wheat as the Arctic air spills all the way down to the Rio Grande.
And crews are continuing to work to get the power back on for those impacted by ice that in some cases more than an inch thick ended up happening. The hardest hit areas for ice, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Tennessee. But the weather problems, they don't end there, as parts of the South were hit with another blast of Arctic air this weekend. In the bullseye, Florida's fruit and citrus crops. Experts expected temperatures in Orlando area to get down into the mid-low 20s. They say those temperatures on top of high wind speeds could damage the crop.
What I worry about is fruit loss and flower loss. Citrus fruits, if you're below 30 degrees for about 4 hours, you start to see fruit damage, and we're getting much lower than that. Strawberries, the berries themselves, when you get in the mid-20s, you have a risk of losing both the fruit and the flowers.
Now ahead of it, farmers were running sprinklers over their fields with the idea that the freezing water would generate a little bit of heat to protect their crops. President Trump visiting Iowa this week and making an important announcement about biofuels, which we will have more on coming up. But he also talked about a major expansion project involving ag equipment giant John Deere. The company saying in a news release it plans to open 2 new U.S.-based facilities, a distribution center for equipment and parts near Hebron, Indiana, and an excavator factory in Kernersville, North Carolina. Deere says it plans to open both next year.
But what it is an excavator factory, as I understand it, and it's going to be the only excavator factory. In other words, excavators. We all know I love those excavators. Believe it or not, I know a lot about them. We don't make them here. This is going to be the only excavator entirely made in the United States of America.
Deere also announcing it is putting 99 workers back on the job. It says the callbacks will bring 75 workers back to its Davenport Works facility in Davenport, Iowa, along with 24 employees to its facilities in Dubuque. It says they should be back on the job by the middle of the month, thanks to a demand increase. Meanwhile, President Trump threatened a 100% tariff on goods from Canada. It was in response to a newly announced trade deal between Canada and China. The president making a threat on his Truth Social site, saying if Prime Minister Mark Carney thinks Canada is going to be a drop-off port for China to send goods and products into the U.S., then he is, quote, sorely mistaken. This follows the recent announcement of a negotiated trade deal between Canada and China to lower tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles in return for lower import taxes on Canadian farm products. Carney said President Trump's threats should be viewed as prepositioning ahead of efforts to renew the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. But Chinese importers are buying up more cargoes of Canadian canola. It comes after Prime Minister Mark Carney's visit to Beijing earlier this month. It's reported China was buying up to 10 cargoes of canola. That represents over 10% of China's canola imports in 2024 and about 20% of its total imports from last year. Well, grain trader Archer Daniels Midland Company has agreed to pay a $40 million civil penalty. It's to settle charges through the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. The Justice Department says ADM reached the settlement without admitting or denying any wrongdoing. It comes after federal prosecutors opened a probe in early 2024 into alleged accounting issues at ADM tied to its performance of the nutrition unit. ADM investigated, and the company did revise its financial reports twice. However, the SEC this week separately sued ADM's former chief financial officer, Vikram Luther. The complaint filed against him accuses him of breaking federal securities laws. In a statement to Ag Day, Luther's legal counsel called the allegations against their client meritless. It says as part of the internal investigation, Luther was not found to have engaged in improper conduct. All right, that's it for the news. When we come back, President Trump throws his support behind E15 during a stop in Iowa. The surprising remarks and what they could mean for the future of E15. Next.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Pioneer. 100 years ago, one seed changed everything. See how it all started at pioneer.com/100.